Every forest has its secrets. Some are harmless, a deer trail here, a forgotten cabin there. But some secrets, they hold darkness. Darkness that whispers your name and drags you where you shouldn't go. I learned this too late. I first heard about the Screaming Tree from Jake. He and I had been close once, but life had pulled us in different directions. The last I heard, he'd moved to the countryside, spending his days hiking through remote trails. So when I received his frantic letter, I knew something was wrong. It read, "Come to the Screaming Tree. You'll know it when you see it. Please, don't ignore this. I need your help." The words lingered in my mind, gnawing at me. Jake had always been skeptical of anything supernatural. For him to write this, it had to mean something. Against my better judgment, I packed a bag and set out for the forest he mentioned. The forest was beautiful at first, the kind of beauty that feels ancient and untouched. But as I ventured deeper, the air grew heavier. The sunlight seemed to fade unnaturally fast, and with every step, I felt eyes on me, hundreds of them, watching from the shadows. Then, I heard it. A faint murmur, like voices carried on the wind. I stopped and strained to listen. At first, I thought it was trickling water or the rustling of leaves. But no, it was human. Whispers. Unintelligible but unmistakable. I followed the sound until I saw it. The Screaming Tree stood in a clearing, towering over everything around it. Its trunk was massive, its bark gnarled and twisted. But it wasn't just a tree. It was alive in a way that no tree should be. Faces jutted out of its bark, hundreds of them. Some were barely visible, others grotesquely detailed, their mouths frozen mid-scream. But the worst part wasn't their appearance. It was the sound. Low, guttural moans that seemed to seep out of the tree itself. And then I realized they weren't coming from the tree. They were coming from the faces. As I stood there, frozen, the voices became clearer. Each face began to tell its story, a cacophony of horror that threatened to overwhelm me. A woman's voice emerged, soft at first, but growing desperate. She told me of a cruel betrayal, how her husband had left her stranded in the woods, miles from safety. The tree, she said, had called to her, offering shelter. But when she leaned against its trunk, the bark had split open and dragged her in. Now, her screams were trapped forever. A man's deep voice boomed, recounting how he had hunted near the clearing decades ago. He had found the tree and decided to carve his initials into it, mocking the stories locals told. The tree, he said, didn't take kindly to his arrogance. The branches came alive, dragging him into its roots. His face glared at me from the bark, his expression one of eternal terror. Then came the children. Their voices were faint, echoing as though from a great distance. I saw their small faces etched into the tree, their mouths open in silent screams. They had been playing hide-and-seek, they told me, when they stumbled upon the tree. One by one, it had lured them closer with sweet promises. A toy, a piece of candy, until it consumed them. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the forest seemed to close in around me. The whispers became screams, rising and falling in a terrible rhythm. I knew I should leave, but something rooted me to the spot, an invisible pull that grew stronger as night fell. I lit a fire, hoping to keep whatever was out there at bay. But the flames only seemed to cast more shadows, long and twisting, that danced against the bark of the Screaming Tree. The faces moved now, their mouths writhing as though struggling to break free. And then I saw him. Jake's face appeared on the tree, his eyes wide with terror. "You shouldn't have come here," he said. His voice was faint, but I heard him clearly. "It's too late now." Before I could respond, the ground began to shake. The roots of the tree burst forth, writhing like snakes. I ran, stumbling through the darkness, the screams of the trapped souls echoing all around me. No matter how far I ran, I always ended up back in the clearing. The forest was like a maze, twisting and shifting, guiding me back to the screaming tree. When I collapsed at its base, the roots rose up, wrapping around my arms and legs. I felt the bark against my back, cold and rough. It began to pull me in, and I knew I was about to join the others. But then, something strange happened. The faces in the tree began to scream louder, their combined voices forming a single word. Fight! Summoning every ounce of strength, I grabbed a nearby rock and slammed it against one of the roots. The tree recoiled, its screams rising to an unbearable pitch. I kept hitting until the roots loosened, and I stumbled free. I don't remember how I escaped the forest. The next thing I knew, I was lying on the side of a road, the dawn breaking over the horizon. But the scars on my arms tell me it wasn't a dream. Jagged lines crisscross my skin, shaped like the tree's roots. And the worst part? Sometimes, late at night, I hear the whispers again. They call to me, growing louder every day. I know I can't resist forever. One day, I'll return to the screaming tree. And when I do, I'll join the others, my face frozen in that cursed bark, screaming for eternity. If you ever hear the whispers, I say now, don't follow them. And if you find the screaming tree, run. Because some roots, they grow into your soul. For more scary stories, like and subscribe.